All right. While we still have power here, Daryl thought we'd be singing "Till the Storm Passes By" earlier. It seemed appropriate this morning, and it definitely seemed appropriate about 5 minutes ago. Oh, there it goes. I hope it doesn't pass by. Bring it on. Just no tornadoes. Huh? Yeah, I don't care about y'all. Well, actually, we may be in worse shape. We have to walk over there. No. As long as it's safe, I want the storm. Well, if you want to turn to John 11, that is a great place. If you noticed, or if you were observant, we are skipping Korah. I put Korah on there. Got to look, and I was like, you know what? Nah, we'll just skip Korah. Korah is the man that the earth swallowed, and that's about it. We'll skip him, and we'll move on to Lazarus. And we're almost to the next woman, okay? We have not forgotten the women. It's been a while, but Lydia is the next woman in line. We're getting there. Just coincidentally, a large gap alphabetically between women to consider. So Lazarus, not the Lazarus of Luke 16, I think it is, but the Lazarus of John 11. The real Lazarus, as was said. And I agree with that. But anyway, Lazarus has been said to mean God has helped, or possibly without help, depending on, I guess, who gives the definition there. He was the younger brother. I put a question mark there, but I think it's established, or well established, supported at least, that he was the younger. The house that they lived in was said to be Martha's house, so that sort of takes away the prospect of him being the oldest. But something about the narrative just gives me the impression he was younger than Mary as well. So he was the younger brother. He was the brother for sure of Mary and Martha, that the two sisters of Bethany. We talked about them a few weeks ago. And Lazarus really was the most notable, I would say, of the three recorded persons that Jesus raised from the dead. And I say he's the most notable just because the account of his raising is the longest. The other two were somewhat brief. Jairus' daughter. Anybody even remember the other one? Okay. The widow at Nain, I guess. Her son at the funeral there. So those are the three recorded instances of Jesus raising somebody from the dead. Raising somebody from the dead is a pretty big deal, so I guess you could maybe assume that those are the only three that Jesus ever raised from the dead, but they're at least the three recorded in the Gospels. So that makes Lazarus the man who lived again. And it's really, there's not a whole lot to say. So hopefully the storm does pass by, maybe sooner rather than later, because we may finish earlier than normal, which I know will be a shocker. But Lazarus of Bethany, I'll just read this quote. I thought it was a pretty good quote from the book. The book is quoting from somebody else. Lazarus of Bethany comes as near to Jesus of Nazareth, both in his character and his services and in his unparalleled experience, as mortal men ever come. Lazarus' name is near to be read in the New Testament till the appointed time comes when he is to be sick, to die, and to be raised from the dead for the glory of God. Nor is his voice heard. He's got no lines, in other words. I don't think. at all. Lazarus loved silence. Now this is a little bit taking liberties, I think, but anyway, we'll cut some slack. He sought obscurity. He liked to be overlooked. He reveled in neglect. The evangelists pass over Lazarus as if he were a worm and no man. And basically all that is to say that they didn't say much about him. That's basically so many words there, basically just saying there's not a whole lot said about Lazarus. But what is said is maybe worth looking at. In John 11, we read that this man was sick. And here's maybe the first thing we learn about Lazarus is this statement here, how Mary and Martha go to Jesus and say, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." He whom you love. And I don't know if there's a real answer to this, why they said that. We could ask the same question about why John is called the disciple whom Jesus loved. But this even seems a little different than that to me. He whom you love. At any rate, it seems like this trio here, this family, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, they had a special bond with Jesus, it seems. He stayed there almost every time he went to Bethany. The way they spoke to each other, or maybe the way they spoke to Jesus, seems to me different than the way other people spoke to Jesus. Just, it all has that air about it of closeness. Somebody that you are comfortable around. Because let's be honest, we talk to people that we're close with differently than we talk to people that we're not close with. There's a less formality, less, not less courtesy per se, but as far as public courtesy, the kind of courtesies that we show, we just speak to strangers differently than we speak to acquaintances, and we speak to acquaintances differently than we speak with friends, and we speak with friends differently with family. That's just a reality of life. And when I see Mary and Martha talking with Jesus, I get the impression that they were close. Just the fact that, when we think about Martha saying, "Do you not care that she's all, sitting here and while I'm, working and serving and all this?" It doesn't sound like something that, somebody else would have said to Jesus. Not that it makes it right. Maybe she didn't have the attitude that it sounds like she had, but at any rate, there's this closeness. And whatever closeness Mary and Martha had with Jesus, it's safe to say, I would say, that Lazarus had the same thing. So very close. He knew the Lord. And maybe it's true. Maybe the writer there that was quoted is right, that maybe Lazarus did love silence. Maybe he didn't talk a lot. Maybe that's the kind of person that he was. He liked to be in the back, in the shadows, I can relate to that. That's where I'd rather be. I know I perceive the irony there that I'm not in the shadows right now, but I can relate to that. Maybe Lazarus was like that. But here's the fascinating thing about Lazarus. Okay, he gets sick. He dies. Jesus doesn't come. He waits. We talked about this a few weeks ago. But let's just entertain here. Well, before we do that, let's think about some other things that we don't know about Lazarus, or that are not mentioned at least. We don't really. He disappears after this. He's gone. We don't see him with Jesus. We don't see him. He's just not mentioned. Now, he may have been there. He may have been with Jesus many times after this, but he's not mentioned. Even at the cross, he's not mentioned. His name is omitted. He doesn't appear. I don't think it's safe to assume that he wasn't a disciple of Jesus, because I think he probably most likely was. I don't think Mary and Martha and Lazarus were just being hospitable to Jesus. I think they obviously believed in him and followed him and were his disciples. But here's what's fascinating to think about somebody who's been raised from the dead. So he dies. He was dead for 4 days, at least. And Jesus goes in there and raises him from the dead. So now he's alive again. Don't you think that would be a weird experience? To be alive again? Being one of the only people who ever, since the beginning of mankind, since the beginning of time, actually can say that you died. I'm not talking about your heart stopped for 30 seconds. I'm not talking about the EKG went, or whatever the thing is called, that went flat. And the doctors came in and, clear and, boom, and now here you are again. I'm talking his spirit left his body, went somewhere else, and then Jesus brought it back, and he gets up and walks out. Put yourself in his shoes. What kind of life do you think he lived after that? Okay, a faithful one. Yeah, I think probably so. Yeah. If that was true, I hope for his sake that author was wrong. Because poor Lazarus, he's not going to be alone very much anymore. I mean, not that 24/7 people are at his door, but he became a very popular man, and for good reason. This is a man that word spread, was dead for 4 days, and now he's up walking around again. In fact, if you turn to John 12, the next chapter, if you have subheadings in your Bible, right after the account of Mary anointing Jesus there with the very expensive ointment, verses 9 through 11 say, when the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, that's what the Greek just says he, presumably Jesus, they came not only on account of him, but also, what's it say? To see Lazarus. Now, we've talked about so many times how when Jesus went somewhere, people found out about it, and that's where they went. Hey, Jesus is here. Jesus of Nazareth. So now here's a crowd. But it may be the first time in the gospel record. The Jews learned that Jesus was there. They came. But this time, not only to see Jesus, but also to see Lazarus. So now the word's spreading. Jesus of Nazareth is there, but also Lazarus of Bethany, whom he had raised from the dead. But it gets worse. Verse 10 says, the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well. Because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting language. Because of him, many of the Jews were going away. What's that supposed to mean? This is just a side note. Going away from them, exactly. Going away from them and believing in Jesus. So good on them for going away in that way, because that's where they should have gone, and that's where the chief priests should have gone too. But here's the thing. Now the chief priests want to kill Lazarus, because here's this word spreading that Lazarus, the dead man, is alive again. What better way to shut that up than to kill the dead man that's alive again and make him dead again? That way, nobody can say Jesus raised him from the dead because he's dead. Right? So that to me provides some commentary for what the rest of Lazarus' life may have been like. It may not have been all that great as far as, hey, now everybody loves me and wants to see me and I'm famous. I'm on the news and stuff, you know. I've got a Wikipedia page now. That's how big of a deal I am. No, there were people who wanted to kill him. And I have a feeling, you know, the narrative, the record doesn't really go too much into detail, but I don't think that was just a short-lived thing. You know, they wanted to kill him, but they got over it, you know, quickly. This probably went on. Because the longer he's alive, the more people are going to hear that he's alive when he was dead, and they're going to be believing in Jesus as a result. So he was living, walking. We say, you know, something's living proof. Lazarus was literally living proof of who Jesus is. And they didn't like that. Maybe that's why he sort of fades away from the narrative, is because he may have had to sort of fade away from public life because he was in danger now the way Jesus was. That also puts him in pretty elite company. To be, not even the apostles were in danger at this point, but Lazarus was. Yeah, Dean? Yeah. Yep. And, you know, most of our questions are unanswered. Why doesn't Lazarus show up again? Why wasn't he at the cross? And so on. But I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Yeah. Yeah.
There were all these assassination plots around Christians. So I'm sure Lazarus was taken out pretty soon. This world.
You think so? You think they did kill him? Is that what you're saying?
I do. Well, the best way, they needed to get rid of the evidence. And that's why they were trying to get rid of Jesus too. I mean, they were trying to kill everything that they didn't like. Didn't work, but
anything that led the Jews to believe in Jesus, they wanted to get rid of. And the problem is, during this time, especially this 3.5 or so years of Jesus' ministry, teaching ministry, preaching ministry, the evidence was everywhere. Because he's going everywhere, all around. And it reminds me of it's humor. I mean, it's funny. It's comedy. When Jesus heals this man's hand in the synagogue, and there he is, and they're arguing, you know, they're trying to, you know, get Jesus in trouble, and yet the man that he's healed is standing there this whole time. And it's like, how did they miss that? You know, here they're accusing Jesus and all this, but the man is just there, like, hello, remember? So that man was proof of what Jesus could do. Anybody else Jesus healed was proof of what Jesus could do. But a man who had been dead, that's the top tier, you know, of living declarations of Jesus' power and His love too, because that also played a part in that. Yeah.
So I think the same thing with Lazarus. They don't just let him this, oh, well, one of these days we really ought to get him. They need plans for both of them.
Yeah. So they would have their little meetings. What are we going to do about Jesus of Nazareth? This time, or from this point on, it seems, at least for a period of time, this time it was, what are we going to do about Jesus and Lazarus? Because they needed him to die too. Yep.
Well, the thing is, in all these cases, God took care of those people. They didn't do it when they want to do it. God protected those individuals. And I'm sure that God probably took care of Lazarus, took care of Jesus, when his time died, his time was born. He took care of him. So, I mean, these are all the cases and the scenes that in the body against God's chosen, so to speak. That's just interesting. All the cases. So, I mean, I didn't know that they were trying to get rid of these individuals. I've been told, and there's no way that they can do it to kill these individuals, but God wanted them to.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do it, they were going to kill them.
Yeah. If God didn't want it to happen, it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. Yeah, Daryl?
Seth, the story of Lazarus takes on a deep meaning when you factor in the sign of Jonah.
Okay.
Remember when they asked Jesus for a sign at the end of his ministry, he said, "For hypocrites, the only sign I'm going to give you is the sign of Jonah." He went on to explain Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. He would be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights.
Mm-hmm.
And they called, and back in the first century, they didn't believe you were fully dead until you were dead for 3 days and 3 nights. And they called that time period the sign of Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Jesus waited so long to go to Lazarus, because he went after 1 or 2 days when Mary and Martha wanted him to, and raised Lazarus from the dead. The scribes and the Pharisees would have said, "Oh, he wasn't really dead. He was just asleep."
Yeah.
But after 3 days and 3 nights, that's proof that you're God. Because Lazarus, there's no doubt that he was fully dead. That's why your 2 witnesses in the book of Revelation are dead for 3.5 days before they're resurrected. And that's why it was imperative for Jesus to be in the grave for a full 3 days and 3 nights. That's the sign of Jonah.
Yeah. So there was no question Lazarus was truly dead. 4 days, by any standard, is plenty of time to know. I mean, yeah. By now, there's an odor. Yeah. You don't want to open that tomb. So there was no question. But there was also no question that he's not dead anymore. And that's why they needed him to be dead again so badly, because it's just interesting that rather than going around trying to say that this story about this Lazarus of Bethany is all a lie, they just, you would think that makes more sense. Like, oh, that's not, that's nonsense. He was dead. He's not dead. I see him. He's right here. He's alive. So how could you possibly think he was dead? He's not, because he's alive. They just thought, we just got to kill him, because then nobody will be able to prove or believe. It'll just put an end to the story, to the tale, because then he'll be dead. Same thing with Jesus. We need to kill him. They tried to counter his teaching for a while, but they gave that up pretty quick. And I love how that statement says how, and from that point they dared not ask him any more questions, because, well, this is a losing battle. So when are we going to kill this guy? Because that's all they could do. So Lazarus, the only place, Lazarus is only mentioned, or mentioned only, in John 11 and 12. I think a lot of the time the reason that some people think that the Lazarus of Luke 16 is the same Lazarus is because chronologically it fits, according to some calculations, Luke 16 comes right before John 11. Of course, John 11 is the account of Jesus raising Lazarus. So I think those dots were connected. I've said, I've gone on record, I firmly believe that Luke 16 is a parable because it starts like all of Jesus' parables started. There was a certain man who who did this and this. That's how Jesus' parables went when they were about a man. So, but I want to clarify, that's not to say that what he says in the parable isn't true, because Jesus never used parables to teach something that wasn't true. He used parables to teach things that were true. So just because it's a parable doesn't mean that it changes anything about what the parable says. But I say that just to say, besides Luke 16 mentioning the name Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha is found only in John 11 and 12. And after the banquet there, in verse 17 is the last time Lazarus is mentioned. The crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to bear witness. So that's the last time Lazarus appears in the text. And that's not even Lazarus in the text. That just says the people that were with him when he raised Lazarus. So Lazarus just sort of fades away. Yeah, and I think that certainly is a very plausible theory for why he not only, it makes perfect sense that he would have tried to lay low, as much as he could. If nothing else, like the book points out, or the handout that I typed up, that he may have done it out of respect and love for Jesus. His presence, maybe he perceived that his presence made Jesus' situation more dangerous, because, or at least it would be better for him if I faded away, or if I just sort of dismiss myself, go somewhere else. Stay away as much as possible. And I think what John says there in chapter 12, verses 9 through 11, or verses 10 and 11, certainly fits in with that. They were wanting to kill him too. So Lazarus being around made it maybe more dangerous for Jesus for the same reason that they wanted to kill Lazarus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, his body's gone. Yeah.
Again. But it's just like the lesson this morning with Moses. He needed to make the promised land. But this earth is not the end of. Moses at least is up in heaven. I assume Lazarus is up. So it's kind of like we get so caught up on earthly things that we miss the spiritual part. That, yeah, God always takes care of his people. But sometimes it's by bringing them home, which is where we want to go anyway. And so and I'm sure if Lazarus died in defense of the Lord, he was happy to do so.
Yeah, Lazarus got a taste of paradise. So, I hate to joke, but he may not have been very happy with Jesus when he was alive again. Of course, he would have been. It was an amazing thing. But Samuel didn't like being disturbed, which there may be other circumstances there, But why you bothering me, basically? Don't get me started on Samuel and Saul. But I'll go off on a tangent. But Lazarus he knew what was waiting for him more intimately than we know. We know because we read, we've been told of it. He knew because he was there. So, not to say that he was a coward trying to run from death, but it may be that he did sort of fade away to the outskirts, or to maybe for the safety or perceived help of Jesus.
The safety of his sisters, too.
Sisters, yeah.
We don't know, it doesn't matter, it's just...
Yeah. Nothing wrong with thinking about this thing. The proponent of that. Yeah. Don't think that Mary and Martha, his big sisters, are two of the main ones that would have told people? Surely. So, that could have put them in some danger too, being some of the most notable mouthpieces of this news that keeps leading to people believing in Jesus. So maybe Lazarus just thought it's best it's the best thing for everybody near me if we just sort of lay low, as they say, lie low. But yeah, he didn't stay alive forever. So eventually the time came, and someday hopefully you can ask him to his face, how'd you die the second time? I know you died the first time. John told us that, he got sick. What happened after that? But we can remember Lazarus as a walking illustration of Jesus, who Jesus is. And when you think about it, you don't just have to be somebody to be that. Somebody already mentioned Paul, Saul of Tarsus, was also living proof of Jesus. Not because he died and Jesus raised him, literally, but because look at who he used to be compared to who he is. So Paul, the apostle, was living proof of God's power and mercy and grace. And in that same way, we can be too. I may not have used to persecute Christians and vote for their deaths and arrest them. And I know, or at least I surely hope, that I'm a better person today than I have been in the past. And God is, and Jesus especially, the reason for that. Dean, do you have something else? Okay. So, be like Lazarus. Be a walking sign of what Jesus can do and who He is by your life. That's what Lazarus did. All he had to do was just live, and he was proof. But by the way we live, we can be that same illustration. Hopefully, that's what we do, that people can look at us and see what God has done and can do and will do for anybody.